Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Mast, and I am the Executive Director of Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, or SEAM as we're known. It's great to see all of you here in person, as well as our colleagues who are joining us online via our live stream. Thank you again for being here for SEAM's 2026 Legislative Preview event. This event is always one of my favorites because it brings together our business members alongside a wide range of partners and people who care deeply about Minnesota's energy future. Before we get into the conversation, I want to recognize and thank our event sponsors for making this gathering possible. Thank you to NextEra Energy Resources, who is our champion event sponsor for today, as well as All Energy Solar, Evergreen Energy, Larkin Hoffman, and True North Solar for your support of SEAM's programming. And I want to extend my gratitude and acknowledge the leaders who have joined us here today. Minnesota Public Utilities Commission Vice Chair Joe Sullivan and Deputy Executive Secretary Mike Bull. Senators Nick Frentz and Andrew Matthews. Representatives Patty Acom and Tom Murphy. Minnesota Department of Commerce Deputy Commissioner Dr. Pete Wyckoff. And our esteemed moderator, Blois Olson. And there may be a few other public officials, elected officials, legislators also in the room, in and out today. Thank you for your presence and your leadership and being here today as well. I would also like to acknowledge SEAM's board members who are in attendance today. If you could please wave to be acknowledged, I would appreciate that. Thank you. And also a huge thank you to the SEAM team for all of your hard work in preparing for today's event, as well as the University of Minnesota and D'Amico Catering for helping host us. We are entering a year marked by shifting federal policy, which brings uncertainty across many industries. However, consistent and well thought out state policy can be the stabilizing force that allows energy projects and good-paying jobs to continue moving forward. That momentum matters now more than ever. Across the state, reliability and affordability are top of mind for Minnesotans. People want confidence that energy will stay dependable and bills will stay manageable. And that is why thoughtful, bipartisan discussions and conversations, just like the one that we're having today, are so important. We may not agree on every detail, but we all share the same core responsibilities to ensure Minnesotans have clean, affordable, reliable energy, to strengthen our economy, and to make decisions that set the state up for long-term success and sustained prosperity. Over the past year, we saw real and meaningful progress. This included investments across a myriad of technologies, including renewable energy generation, energy storage, clean transportation, geothermal, transmission, and further innovations in sustainable aviation fuel and advanced manufacturing. We saw Minnesota entrepreneurs via the Minnesota Energy Alley initiative bring forward new technologies. And we saw the continued growth of a clean energy workforce that now includes a state record of nearly 64,000 Minnesotans working in our industry. As we look ahead, our expert panelists can help us to understand how to keep that momentum going, where they see opportunity, and what they believe will shape the upcoming legislative session. So as we dive into our program, I would like to again thank our champion sponsor, NextEra Energy Resources, who has been a steadfast member of SEAMS and a partner in Minnesota's energy leadership, and we are so grateful for their continued engagement. Representing NextEra Energy Resources here today in the room is Amy Koch-Fredrickson, as well as Allison Nessie. Thank you for being here. And we have two short videos from NextEra Energy Resources leadership that have been prepared for all of us this morning. So let's take a listen.
Hello everyone, I'm Adam Gracia, a Project Director of Development for NextEra Energy Resources here in Minnesota. On behalf of our entire Minnesota development team, we are very sorry we can't be there in person today. We wish we could join you, but we're currently deep in strategy planning to help shape Minnesota's energy future. Even though we couldn't be there live, we didn't want to miss a chance to say thank you for everything you do to help bring energy projects to the Gopher State. Your partnership truly makes a difference. With that, I'd like to share a short introduction to NextEra Energy Resources. Thanks, and hope to see you all soon.
From the expansion of artificial intelligence to the onshoring of manufacturing, America needs more energy. Energy from fast and low-cost solutions. Firm energy from natural gas power generation and nuclear. Dispatchable energy from battery energy storage systems. It will take technology and data to meet energy demands. For over 30 years, NextEra Energy Resources has led the energy industry. We are the largest investor in energy infrastructure in North America. Let's build together.
Thank you again to NextEra Energy Resources for your support of today's event. And now I'd like to move into a very special part of our program. This morning, we have the privilege of honoring someone whose work has shaped how Minnesotans understand the world of energy for decades. SEAM's Excellence in Clean Energy Journalism Award is being presented to someone who is not only respected, but deeply appreciated by everyone who has watched this industry grow and evolve. Frank Jossi is one of the rare journalists who can take a complex topic without much fanfare and give it column space. He has brought clarity, honesty, and genuine curiosity to every story that he writes. Frank has a remarkable ability to connect the dots between policy, technology, and the people whose lives are affected by both. His reporting helps Minnesotans see the bigger picture at a time when energy conversations can feel noisy and complicated. Frank, your work has made our energy ecosystem better. You have helped people understand what matters, why it matters, and where Minnesota is heading. We are grateful for your voice and your dedication, and it is an honor to present you with your award. So please join me at the podium.
I don't know about the respect part, but as I'm slouching toward retirement, first I'd like to thank SEAM for recognizing the importance of journalism in getting the word out about legislation, innovation, and progress and setbacks in the clean energy economy. Many of you in this room I have interviewed. If not, see me later. For those who helped me write about this industry, I want to say a hearty thank you for taking the time to explain your business, your policy proposals, and your passion for changing the world. I wrote my first clean energy story before some of you were born in the late 1970s. Published by Madison Magazine when I was still a student, the story covered the then sort of growing solar industry, and I would not write another clean energy story for something like 30 years. Despite a strong interest in the topic. But in 2011, Finance and Commerce gave me an assignment of writing a monthly column called Sustainable. And that same year, I began contributing to a plucky little web-based startup called Midwest Energy News. Fresh Energy founder Michael Noble started Midwest Energy News with the idea it would encourage mainstream media to begin to pay attention to clean energy issues. It worked. The Star Tribune republished our stories and then assigned a series of stellar reporters to cover the field. And I went from a Midwest Energy News contributor to its Minnesota correspondent. My timing could not have been better. Clean energy was everywhere. Lawmakers passed groundbreaking legislation. Businesses started, and existing businesses grew. The breadth of topics I covered was huge. The nation's leading community solar program, wind energy and its impact on rural Minnesota, the CapX Power Line Project, electric vehicles, the grid, MISO, the Public Utilities Commission, the impact of faith-based groups on clean energy, new financing schemes like PACE, energy efficiency programs, city sustainability plans, solar thermal, bioenergy, battery storage for low-income households, interesting entrepreneurs of color, the role of co-ops and munis, the XL Solar Q. A lot of stories on that one. And even the value of solar. Remember that migraine-inducing topic? I do. I also learned about the nonprofit clean energy infrastructure and groups like SEAM and their significance and power in turning legislative proposals into future realities. In fact, in 2016, I wrote about a little nonprofit startup that hung out at the same co-working space as I did, and Greg Mass still leads it. It's been a great run. I wrote something like 484 stories for Midwest Energy News, now part of Canary Media. It's free, you can subscribe. And around 160 or so columns for finance and commerce. Weirdly, my most popular story for Midwest Energy News turned out to be a small one about the problem of snow on solar panels and a Duluth startup solution, a technology that heated the panels to melt snow. For 5 or 6 years, it was one of Midwest Energy's most popular stories, reaching tens of thousands of readers. The startup went under after a couple weeks after I wrote the piece, but the interest was still there for years afterwards. As for the value of solar, well, I might have been its only reader. And thanks again, Greg, Peter, George, and the rest of the Clean Energy Economy Minnesota staff for supporting me and this important industry.
Thank you again, Frank, for your decades of great storytelling and coverage. We now turn to another recognition that carries tremendous meaning for SEAM, our business members, and for our state. SEAM's Melissa A. Hortman Award honors exceptional contributions that have shaped Minnesota's energy future in ways that will last for generations. Speaker Emerita Hortman embodied everything that this award represents. Melissa Hortman was one of the most accomplished and effective public servants our state has ever known. Her and her husband Mark's assassination this year was a devastating and senseless loss felt across Minnesota. She devoted her life to building a better, fairer, more resilient state through public service. She led with strategic vision, calm resolve, and a deep belief in the common good. Her impact on Minnesota's energy landscape is profound. She helped pass landmark legislation, from the solar energy standard to the creation of community solar gardens. And she played a central role in the passage of Minnesota's 100% carbon-free electricity standard in 2023, one of the most significant energy policies in our state's history. SEAM had the privilege of working closely with Speaker Hortman over many years. She joined us at numerous clean energy business days at the Capitol, summer unwinds, and countless of other events that SEAM sponsored, held, and convened. She was always generous with her insight, always committed to the hard work of making Minnesota better. She believed in the potential of this state and the people driving its energy future. Her legacy will live on through the lives that she's touched, the policies she shaped, and the future that she helped build. Today, it is our honor and privilege to honor her memory with the creation of the inaugural Melissa A. Hortman Award. While her family was unable to join today, we will be delivering the award to them in the very near future. So please join me in a round of applause as we remember and thank her and never forget all that she has contributed to our industry and to our state. Thank you all so much. Minnesota PUC Deputy Executive Secretary Mike Bull will help to introduce Vice Chair Sullivan for his remarks. And then also, after that, we will have Boyce Olson and our panelists come up and have the panel discussion. And I just wanted everyone to know that we do have a number of folks joining us online as well as here in the room. And we did have questions that were able to be submitted upon registration. And so we have incorporated those questions from folks into the questions the panel will be discussing today.
Good morning, everyone. I just love this event, and I really appreciate Greg and George and the whole team. I look forward to this every year. It's like old home week, you know. I look out at the audience and I realize I've probably worked with or for almost all of you, so it's really good to see everybody again. I've known Commissioner Joe Sullivan, our keynote this morning, for about 20 years. And when I first met Joe, he was representing municipal utilities from western Minnesota up at the Capitol, and was so good at that we recruited him hard to join us at the Center for Energy and Environment. And at CEE, I realized that Joe isn't just smart. He's highly strategic and analytic. He launched our very successful SIP in Your District program with Jamie Fitzke, who's was planning to be here this morning, but she fell down some stairs. So I hope she's doing okay if she's listening at home. To show legislators how energy efficiency can solve real-world problems for their constituents. Joe also recognized at the time, and probably still today, that most of the clean energy community is sort of oppositional to our electric cooperatives, and Joe realized that we needed to have strong relationships to those folks in order to make progress on our clean energy goals. So he strengthened our ties with co-ops, highlighted the many innovations that they bring to bear on behalf of their membership, to serve their membership, and he chronicled those in a white paper, Minnesota's Electric Cooperatives, Laboratories of Innovation. I think it's still available on the CEE website. Joe then joined the Department of Commerce as the Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Energy Resources, and I can say without hesitation that without Joe's leadership in that role, the broad coalition of environmental groups, utilities, consumer advocates, and more, that coalition that was behind the energy conservation and optimization legislation would have fractured, and that landmark, truly bipartisan legislation would never have gotten off the ground. He kept delicate negotiations on track through his humor and intellect, and through thick and thin brought us over the finish line, and Minnesotans are reaping the benefits of his work. And now, as the vice chair of the commission and a regional leader in the organization of MISO states, among Joe's many accomplishments is that he helped secure MISO board approval of the Tranche 2 transmission lines, which will be the largest transmission investment in U.S. history, 24 high-voltage transmission projects throughout the Midwest, totaling over 3,600 miles. These lines, high-voltage transmission lines, will enhance regional reliability and generate something on the order of $70 billion in net benefits over the 20 years once those lines get into place. It's fair to say that Joe Sullivan is easily one of the best regulators I've worked with and known in my 30-year career. And he's one of the many reasons that the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission is among the most respected commissions in the country. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Joe Sullivan.
I told Mike that he was going to make me choke up. I'm not used to hearing about myself that way, but that's very kind. I very much appreciate you saying that. My mom was a Catholic nun before she met my dad. But but she would be the first to tell me, remember, Joe, you're but a man, so chill out. Have a sense of humility. But anyways, I do very much appreciate that. That was very kind. I am here to talk about affordability, the clean energy transition. First, I want to talk about an introduction to the commission, and I'll be brief. But Minnesota's Public Utility Commission is the state's, actually we're the oldest regulatory agency in the state. Started in the 1880s as the Railroads and Warehouse Commission. Today, we are Minnesota's only independent regulatory agency, so we're similar to one of the independent agencies that the federal government has. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the FERC, the Federal Regulatory Energy Commission, or Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, the Federal Communications Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But we are a creature of the legislature. We're not a member of the executive branch, and the legislature has granted to the commission the authorities of all three branches of government. So we're quasi-judicial, quasi-legislative, and administrative. So our commissioners are each appointed to a 6-year term. They're staggered. The governor appoints us, and then the Senate confirms us. So it's very nice to see our senators here. You guys are doing a great job. But we have our decisions are made in the public. And they are developed through the public record that everybody can see on our webpage in the docket. And one of the things that I like to point out is when you come to the commission, you'll see all 5 of us up there. And the first time that we are up there and talking that's the first time that we have seen each other to talk about this particular issue. So the conversation can sometimes seem stilted or weird, or maybe we look a little argumentative, or we're trying to figure out. That's by design. That's so the public can see how we reach a decision. They can see our judgment process. And I think at first that's very disconcerting as a new commissioner when you come into that, like, why can't I just talk to them? It's like, well, you cannot. You're like a judge. And in fact, the structure, we are the only agency that our decisions are appealed directly to the Court of Appeals, unlike a state agency, a cabinet agency, whose decisions are appealed. They go directly to a district court. So the public has a right to see us make our decisions. Everything is in the public for people to see, and that is by design. That's how the system is made to work. So now to the topic at hand. What does affordability mean to the commission? Quite simply, the cost of utility service should be accessible and manageable for all Minnesotans who are served by the utilities that we regulate. And we are doing that to ensure high quality of service without imposing an undue energy burden. When we do that, we take cost effectiveness of utility investments, the equity of how those costs are allocated amongst consumers. So that's why we have different rate classes. We have a residential class, we have a commercial class, we have an industrial class. Within the residential class, we look at the energy burden that folks are hearing. All of these go into the soup of how we're creating rates. And we make sure that the services that people face are reliable, that they're sustainable. But a key part of reliability is actually expensive. You could have a really inexpensive system. It wouldn't be reliable. So with reliability, we consider that when we have low reliability, that imposes a huge cost on the system too. So with that, affordability, where it starts, where it begins, is in the oversight of all utility costs, of the utility planning process. So we do integrated resource planning. I'm sure many folks have heard about IRPs. We also do integrated distribution planning for electric utilities, transmission planning, which I have the honor of being able to be Minnesota's representative to MISO through the organization of MISO states. But integrated resource planning for electric and gas utilities, that's where, kind of at a macro level, that's where we're looking at that system. And it starts at this big picture. What we are doing in the resource planning process is looking for the optimal portfolio of utility investments needed to serve the forecasted load for that period of time. And then we compare that with numerous alternatives. So like when we get a resource plan, at the very beginning of the resource plan, you might have 50, 60, 70 different runs of different resource stacks and resource portfolios. And what the process of the resource planning process gets you down to is what is the optimal portfolio? What is the optimal, it filters just down to this is Minnesota's plan moving forward in the next 5 years. Then we get a 5-year action plan that comes out of that and a 10-year lookout. And that's the resource plan. That's where everything starts. But cost, reliability, compliance with federal and state law are all the focus. So the affordability process then moves to a project. So then say the 5-year action plan calls for 2,000 megawatts of wind. In that, now we look at, okay, we have 10 projects that are bidding in for this 2,000 megawatts of wind. Are these the right fit? So we're moving down to the specific projects. Is this a good fit? This is not a good fit. And then we're approving the utility to move forward if it is a good fit. But the utility has not made an investment yet. So we're looking at those projects. We look against the alternatives. The resource plan said wind was the best option, but maybe solar is now better. We're looking at all these different, we're kind of dialing it in, we're titrating it in. But project approval takes place before the utility investments are made. So now we get to rates. And rates is when we are at the rates, now we are saying, okay, this is a prudent investment. Now let's look at the utility has made these investments. Did they make those, were there cost overruns? Were those foreseeable cost overruns? We look at it, we dig deep into the actual project itself to make sure that that is recoverable. If everything looked what we would call prudent, then we allow them to lower those or layer those into rates. So that would be either base rates or riders. These are important concepts, but base rates and riders, and then also the fuel clause. We do look at, are the expenditures for the fuel clause every year, are they just and reasonable, are they prudent? But once we determine that it's prudent, it's in rates. If we determine it's not prudent, then the costs are disallowed. So, and rate cases. Rate cases that is where we have rate cases we've had a number of rate cases over the last 5 years, but rate cases are where we literally scrutinize every line item that the utility is loading into rates. So their maintenance costs, their operations costs, if they have they have incentive pay structure for employees. We look at all of that and we make sure, is this consistent with the just and reasonable delivery of utility service, or is it not? But through this process, utility rate requests are whittled down to the bare minimum necessary to operate the utility and provide reliable service to customers. So what we have is it's kind of like this one-way ratchet. We're whittling everything down to that. This is the cost. This is consistent with Minnesota state policy, and this is the cost that Minnesotans have to pay. Now, this is an important point for affordability, and I'm going to make it right now, and I'm a little off script. But right now, when the utilities, their rate base, that is the money that they collect, they're authorized to collect from Minnesotans every year. When you look at the rate base for the 3 electric utilities that we regulate in Minnesota, that's about $17 billion those utilities are authorized to collect from Minnesotans every year for the provision of electric service. So when we think about affordability, we have to think about it within the context of that $17 billion number. And I think this is an important point for legislators as you think about the programs that people will ask you to do or the policies that are that you're asked to implement or enact, and what's their rate impact. But $17 billion. Excel is about $14 billion of that. Otter Tail is about $1.1 billion of that, and Minnesota Power is about $2.7 billion of that. So affordability in action. This process, what this is, these are just some highlights over the last couple months and couple years. But over the last 5 years, we have disallowed $1.7 billion in proposed rate increases from 2020 to 2024. That is through the process that we've been talking about. The Department of Commerce, organizations like CUB, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, they come in, the large user group, they come in and they make their case for why this should be disallowed, why this cost should not be allowed. $1.7 billion in proposed rate increases have been disallowed. So this is just the commission doing its work. So from an affordability perspective, making sure that the commission can do its work, that it's funded, is delivering results from an affordability perspective. Eliminating in the community solar garden program from moving from the applicable retail rate to the value of solar, that is going to save $687 million over 17 years from ratepayer costs. In the elite acquisition process, so that's the Minnesota Power being acquired by Global Infrastructure Partners and the Canadian Pension Fund. The commission drove $200 million in ratepayer relief over the next couple of years for Minnesota Power customers. So when you think about that with reference to that overall rate base that I was telling about, which is about $2.5 billion, this is a real benefit to Minnesotans. $50 million in customer bill credits. That was specifically from Chair Sieben. She pushed for that. They built the record around that, and the partners agreed to it. $10 million in home weatherization. That was from Commissioner Partridge. That is money that is going to go directly into northern Minnesota to weatherize people's homes. Reducing the cost of the clean energy transmission by $50 million. That's the Department of Commerce that pushed for that. That's money that's going to go directly into buying down the clean energy transition. $3.5 million in residential customer arrearage forgiveness. That's from Commissioner Tuma. Capped Minnesota power profitability. That was Commissioner Hom. These are all important decisions that were made that will directly benefit Minnesotans as a result of the acquisition. So, and now I'm getting to the end. I know I'm probably a little long. Sorry, Greg. But affordability, this is a recent Department of Energy, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab study. I would encourage everybody in this room to look at it. It's very long. It's very dense. But I encourage you to, it is a deep, deep and a very fair dive into this issue. A key takeaway from this is what you can see is that when you adjust for inflation, electric rates are at or below inflation when you adjust for inflation. So that's important. That is commissions in Minnesota and throughout the land doing their work, keeping this at inflation. Now, this is even more important, and I think this is a critical point about why conservation, the Conservation Improvement Program, why ECO is so important. And when you take the rate, which is the price, but then you multiply that by consumption, that's really what's important. Consumption is what we're using. When you do that, Minnesota has the 7th lowest bills on the residential class in the country. And that's the result. That is ECO. That is ECO. That's the demand-side management programs, conservation in action. Critically important. So we might have slightly higher rates than our neighboring states, but the bills, what people pay, which I think is the far more important metric, we're paying lower. That's cold comfort for people who are suffering. Over the last couple of years, what you can see is arrearages have gone up, and XL residential billing complaints have gone up. Now, a concluding thought, and then I'm going to leave my legislative friends here with a couple ideas that I didn't put on paper strategically. Mike said I was strategic. But my thinking on this, and this is just my thinking as a commissioner, one commissioner, it's not the commission's view, but legislators can think about some solutions from the relatively small to the very impactful. On the small, think about what is the impact of each legislation? What's the rate impact? Put that into the bill. Just put that so we know what the potential impact. But a deeper look. You can put a rate impact in, but if it increases base rates by 10 million, but it reduces the fuel clause by 20 million, that's a good thing. So we got to have a deeper look at it. But considering the impact of the bills you propose, potential. This is controversial amongst the utilities, but potentially capping interim rates at the rate of inflation. Capping of interim rates. Interim rates are a process where the utility can bring us a rate case, and Before the case is fully litigated, we have to, they're subject to one exception, we have to implement those rates. Well, you could limit that to the rate of inflation. That could be a potential. Limiting the recovery of executive compensation, prohibiting the recovery of utility lobbying costs. We as a commission already do this, but a future commission could decide that they want to change that. So you could memorialize that and put that in statute. That would limit those ratepayer impacts. But these are things that are kind of on the margins. The very impactful things would be appropriation of supplemental energy assistance, appropriation of weatherization money. Weatherization, the vast majority of the dollars for weatherization in the state come from the federal government. Well, a couple years ago, thank you to Representative Acom and Senator Friends and others, we put more money into weatherization. We put state money into weatherization, but the work isn't done. When I was at the Department of Commerce, we put together numbers that showed that it would cost, I don't want to put the number out there because it's dated, but it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe we could set a target for how many houses we weatherize. That's just an idea from me. You can limit your anger or whatever. But appropriation to reduce arrearages. And here's another idea. And again, I recognize there'd be a lot of conversation around this and a lot of good conversation. But we have the Renewable Development Account in Minnesota where we're collecting for RDA. We're building tons of renewables in this state. Maybe we could take the RDA, we're collecting both, maybe we could take the RDA and use it to reduce the costs for XL system resources, clean energy resources. These would be ways to reduce ratepayer and affordability benefits, and I think this is, but you have to think about this within the context of the foundation. We have utilities that their rate base is in the $17 billion total range. So we're working at the margins here. These are prudently determined costs, we're working at the margins, but some of these things, especially things like weatherization, can have a long-term systemic effect and make people's lives better and reduce their bills. So with that, I know I'm over time. Thank you, George. Thank you, Greg. Sorry to folks online. Cue applause. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to have our legislators come on up, and we'll start the panel. I had a thought when the commissioner was speaking that I don't go to the commission very often, but when I do, it's usually not a good sign. And I made note of your ideas, even though you didn't write them down. So don't worry, they're memorialized. And they'll find the light of day, maybe even on the day of the budget forecast, where we may be looking in the couch cushions for money. So I want to thank everybody for being here, introduce our panel. Why don't you each take about 15, 20 seconds, yes, including you, Senator Frentz. Keep it short, introduce yourself, where you're from, and your position in committees related to energy. So we'll start with you, Dr. Wyckoff.
Yeah, it's on, all right. I'm Pete Wyckoff. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Commerce. I run the Energy Division, which is a weird sort of thing that's unique to Minnesota. We're both the State Energy Office. We run programs and policies. We do weatherization. We run the efficiency programs that have already been referenced. We face in that side of our office the legislature and the federal government and seek assistance. We also have a regulatory unit, and how to explain that relationship to the PUC. I think the quickest way, though not completely accurate, is that we are state's attorney at the PUC. We tell the PUC what's in the best interest of Minnesota and all their issues, and sometimes they listen. We say what's in the best interest of Minnesota, but it's really what the governor would like the PUC to do. So when you get an IRP that comes before the PUC that has a settlement agreement, that settlement agreement was negotiated by us. When you get an acquisition of a utility that comes before the PUC that has a settlement agreement that was negotiated by us. Unlike the PUC, we are allowed to talk to everybody and try to come to a conclusion and offer it up, and then they modify. So,
Representative Murphy. Where you're from and why you care about these issues. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Tom Murphy from Otter Tail County. I represent Otter Tail and Douglas County. I'm on the Energy Committee. I'm the GOP side of the as vice chair. My background is I've worked 40 years in agriculture, 33 years as a small business owner. And so here really represent the interests and make sure that we have a good debate, a good conversation about what's really best for Minnesota taxpayers in regard to energy. So I'm really happy to be on the Energy Committee. That's a favorite of mine. We've done a great job in there, I think, of having some super conversations. So I'm Tom Murphy. Thanks.
Representative Acom.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Representative Patty Acom. I represent the western suburbs of Minneapolis and was first elected to the legislature in 2018 and was grateful to be put on the Energy Committee right away. I have chaired the committee for the last 3 years and co-chaired last year with the GOP. So I'm thrilled to be here for the conversation. Thanks for all the great work that you and all of you in this ecosystem do for this important work. So I look forward to the conversation.
Senator Matthews.
Good morning, everyone. My name is, good morning, everyone. My name is Senator Andrew Matthews. I live in Princeton, and my district includes most of Sherburne County with pieces in Mille Lacs County, Isanti County, and Anoka County. And I have been privileged to serve the city of Becker and the Sherco energy plant there for my 9 years, going into 10th year in the Senate. And I've seen a lot of the trickle-down effects from decisions made in St. Paul and how it's impacting the real-world families that live in the communities there around Becker. And so we've continued to push hard for common sense changes and improvements, especially pushing affordability and reliability. I've been on the Energy Committee my entire time, and I've been the GOP lead for the last 3 years. So grateful to all of you for having us here today.
Senator Frentz.
Thanks, Boyce. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Frentz. I'm from the city of North Mankato and represent District 18, roughly described as the Mankato area. Very much want to start by thanking all of you for the work you do, the innovation that you help drive, and the jobs and taxes that you provide. It's my honor to chair the Senate Energy, Utilities, Environment, and Climate Committee, work with Senator Matthews, and I see a couple topics brewing like affordability and bipartisanship, and really looking forward to that discussion. Thank you.
I'm going to just start out, and we've started to talk about this in our shop when we track energy. Energy is, and the cost of energy nationally is a top 5 issue for the first time in about 20 years. Minnesota obviously doing well in affordability. And you look at the dynamics of the legislature, it's been a while since there's been kind of a moonshot or a big idea. And nuclear and transmission for economic development are going to be required debates and consideration. Starting with you, Senator Frentz, how do you frame up and get a divided legislature to address demand and how we create more power here, including nuclear, in a legislature that hasn't been that open to really big ideas, and you're going to need bipartisan support?
Thanks. That's a great place to start. First of all, very proud of the work in the Senate that we've done on the advanced nuclear study. So I think it's fair to say that twice we've passed the bipartisan study. I think we should look at that. The tension with nuclear goes something like this. We have to have it to meet our 100% clean energy by 2040 goal. We cannot get there without it. We also want to make sure that we're making winning decisions for all Minnesotans on cost and reliability. It is perfectly reliable, and what's changed in the public's conscience over the last 20 years, and therefore what's changed somewhat amongst legislators, is that it's carbon-free. So regardless of exactly where you peg the costs in terms of money and lives of climate change, nuclear is a more acceptable form, setting aside for a moment the issue of cost. Minnesota has a little bit of a peculiar situation, though, because in my view, we broke a promise to Prairie Island in the 1970s and in the 1990s in particular. So on the DFL side, I think it will be necessary for us to come up with a solution that incorporates nuclear that is still acceptable to the two principal players that come before our committee, which is the Prairie Island Indian Community and XL Energy. Currently, XL is not pressuring us to develop new nuclear. It's affordable. In parts, the cost of legacy construction has still not made it competitive enough that we'll hear more about it. So on the affordability scale, we would like to take a closer look at advanced nuclear. Not sure that some of the old technology will be cost competitive in the near future.
Representative Murphy, the goal is 2040. It's going to be 2026 in a few weeks. Is it possible? How do you bring people together for a big push to get to carbon-free and have the transmission to support, economic development like data centers?
Well, I think it's, what's happened in the House that I think that's been beneficial is with the 67-67 tie, we are a lot more on tune to each other in terms of what we need to be talking about and how we need to address those things. So we've toured the data centers. We've looked at how their impact has been. Definitely need to be able to keep looking at those needs. With data centers, it's a real national security issue as well. Not only for having a base of an economy that's important for us, but it's important from a national security level that we participate in this. And so we want to be players, but how do we do it? And so I 100% with a nuclear moratorium lift, we need to work all those details out, but certainly that will be a great way for us to move forward. There is a lot of conversation, I think, that's happening that's good in energy. When we get together and talk, there's a lot of things that we can agree on, and I think that's the starting point that we need to be. I do have a little bit of concern that we need to fully vet everything as we go through. Sometimes we run, and then we forget to walk a little bit, so when we run, we miss things. And so we need to be really fine-tuned to make sure that we're doing the right thing and making sure that we don't miss anything that's really crucial. I appreciate Commissioner Sullivan's words on how well we're doing today, and I hope we can continue that, but we need to focus on that affordability, and especially with ratepayers moving forward. So I do have real hope. I think our Energy Committee in the House has been excellent at being able to fully vet these, and I look forward to continuing to do that.
Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff, as you think about what we've set as goals as a state and maybe some curveballs that have been thrown your way by the legislature or the legislative process in meeting those goals, does the state have the vision and the pathway to get there depending on the administration? Because sometimes it's the administration that has changed their mind mid-session on how do we do things like data centers.
Yeah, I would say that the curveballs are being thrown by the federal government, not by the folks on this panel. So want to differentiate those things. The biggest curveball we have is that the wind and solar tax credits are going away. That's going to make those technologies more expensive. Here's the thing, they're still going to be the cheapest way to add new electricity to the grid. So we will still use them. They will just cost more, and those costs will be passed on to ratepayers because of federal government action, not because of anything that folks are doing on the stage here. That's a curveball. I think we at the state level are doing what we should be doing. We are struggling, just like every state is, to figure out what is the best way to manage the promise of large loads, which can be a benefit. The systems tend to be overbuilt. We don't use most of our electric generation most of the time because we have the electric generation we need just for peak. So if we can use more of that generation most of the time but not drive up peak, then increased loads actually drive down the cost of electricity by spreading the fixed cost out farther. But if we can't figure out a way to bring on large loads like data centers without driving peak way up, then we're looking at a reverse situation where this could be really bad for rates. So we have to look very carefully. We passed some data center legislation. They passed some data center legislation that I think is a great first step in the last session. And we're talking to every state. Everyone's wrestling with how to to manage this on a regulatory side, on an incentive side, on a environmental side beyond electricity. And I think we're getting a lot of inquiries from other states about, hey, it looks like you're doing some good stuff in Minnesota, and then we're saying, yeah, and this is what we're doing, what are you doing? So it's a feeling our way forward situation.
Representative Acom, as you look at the next session, what are the priorities to either move forward with or set a path forward for the future on affordability and reliability?
Well, very important issues for sure. And in terms of what are we looking for this next session, it's going to be trying to continue a little bit of the really important work that we started last session on data centers. I think that we're seeing where projects are happening around the state and a lack of transparency. One of the things we tried to get included last year was restrictions on non-disclosure agreements. I think it's concerning when we have locally elected officials who are signing non-disclosure agreements with the data centers, and we're seeing a lot of pushback by one particular at this time. And so I think that there's bipartisan support to put some guardrails on that to ensure that local communities have a fair understanding about what's coming up. And then I think also another piece that we weren't able to get involved or in last year's data center bill, even though we passed some really great protections that I think are going to really help protect Minnesota and Minnesota ratepayers. And the other issue that didn't get included was environmental review. And we're seeing that several of the projects that have been proposed in Minnesota are going through lawsuits because of inappropriate or lack of environmental review. And so I'm not saying this needs to be arduous. I don't think it needs to be years long in process, but I think that we can come together and put some appropriate environmental review to ensure our state and our resources are being protected from some of the largest corporations and wealthiest corporations in the world. And so those are some of the things that I'm working on to build on some of the work that we did last year.
Senator Matthews, as you think about next session, where are the priorities? What needs to get done? What needs to be framed up for the future?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think we are going to have a lot of discussion on nuclear and data centers again next year. We actually did get a curveball in this last session, and it impacted my specific district because there was a data center proposal that had a lot of community support, and there was early on indication of positive support from the administration about we needed just some basic regulatory reform for what needed to go before the PUC, and things were moving along with that until the curveball came and the administration switched, and that part got cut out of the final bill. So I went from the author of one of the first data center bills of the year to voting against the final proposal. While there were a couple of things that were in there that I supported, there were a lot of things I felt were unnecessary, including a whole bunch of extra fees. There were a lot of legislators that didn't want to support it until we were taking a lot of money out of these places for state coffers with that. And the result was killing the project in my local community, which over the last 10 years has gone through Sherco's winding down. Then it was going to get replaced by a gas plant. Then that rug got pulled out from under them. Now this is the second data center that's been pulled out in the last 3 or 4 years from my community. So they're going to be facing some pretty significant community budget shortfalls. They've been extremely proactive in how to plan because Sherco has provided like over 60% of the tax base that supports the schools, that supports the city, that supports the emergency infrastructure, and that's going away. And a lot of the projects that they've been trying to replace it with keep getting knocked down at the state level. So we'll be back at that. I think the data center deal definitely can get improved upon because it is driving a lot of these. The impact on Minnesotans will be the same. They'll just be served from data centers that will be just outside the borders in all our neighboring states, taking with it the job and economic development and tax benefits with them. So we've got to get it right. I think we tried to make a step. I think we've got to do better at it. And nuclear, I thought we were super close this last year, and then I believe some political decisions got made and didn't quite get done this last year, but we're going to keep at it. I talk extensively with all the partners with that. There's a ever-growing nuclear alliance that's forming around the state of Minnesota. My county in Sherburne County just joined the alliance and are urging a number of other counties all over the state to jump on board because they want to have that door open. There's a lot of areas that may be prime sites that are close to interconnects or are close to already existing grid infrastructure systems. And right now with the moratorium, they can't have the conversation about whether or not a proposal in their location would make sense and would be cost effective or not. And when we say have the conversation, that's more than just a panel discussion or it comes up as a topic of debate. It's the actual real, the real work nitty gritty of the proposals, the planning, the IRPs, the things that our energy providers have to do moving forward. That door's closed. So there's a lot more to do that I'll keep pushing on, and we'll see what comes about at next session.
Senator Frentz, one of the topics we've hit on now, I know is one of your favorites, regulatory reform, permitting. What can be done to make us competitive with other states in the time it takes to get a permit? Like Representative Icom said, she doesn't want to delay things, but we do have a strong reputation for being a little slower than our neighbors.
Yeah, I think if I were one of you sitting in this room, that might be my first question. State of Minnesota is too slow. Does not prevent us from asking questions we want to ask, does not prevent us from protecting our ratepayers or the environments, but we're too slow. What we could do if we wanted, if it was a priority, is expedite processes, change timelines. We could hire more staff, I suppose, and make their job to speed it up. I represent a largely rural district, and the permitting discussion is going very badly for the state of Minnesota. Things that we can permit in South Dakota in 90 days take 18 months. These are real Minnesotans just like you, trying to make a living, put a roof over their heads, food on the table, clothes on back. And I don't have a good answer why we're so slow. I do think we want to be careful. We are known for protecting the environment, and those are good things. My father was a Sierra Club member his whole life. But what we could do is say we're committed to it. We made some progress in clean energy permitting. I want to thank the PUC for that. I thought that was good input that we got and got something passed. But my friends across the aisle make a good point. We're going to make clean energy permitting better, but the rest of it has to wait. And I think one of the questions that you got on here, Blois, is about bipartisanship. And I'll just say, I think permitting reform, like energy itself, can be bipartisan. That's a good thing. Bipartisan solutions are durable. The public has more confidence in them, and you mark my words, they last a lot longer. So count me in for work on permitting reform, and that includes not just in the energy sector, but across the board.
Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff, what can be done? Is there a view, is there work being done within the department that says we could go faster, here's what we need?
So I think we need to differentiate between environmental permitting and the energy permitting that happens at the PUC. The PUC processes are being sped up by legislation passed just 2 years ago that went into effect just this July. And I am optimistic that that will help with energy project permitting, speeding it up. I think it was a good bill, and it's just getting implemented now. I think what folks are talking about are processes that are more in the EQB, DNR, MPCA area, and I really am not going to.
Well, no. Let's bring it up, because those departments have to work together. Yeah. I think that is one of the biggest frustrations with permitting. And so as the departments who have to talk to each other, how do you talk to each other better? How do you streamline it? Because this has been a question on every panel for 10 years. And so as we talk about it, for 10 years, people have been asking for the departments to work together. And when you're a deputy commissioner and you don't, I just want to know, how are you working together? Is it improving?
I will say yes. We in the Department of Commerce only have permitting activity in the energy space. So I can't, I can't sit up here and say, I promise you. So I came from a federal background. I worked in the Senate as a staffer before, and we were looking at a lot of national permitting reform proposals. They do the same things that we are doing in energy here. They make processes happen simultaneously. They reduce the length of each step. They take things that are relatively simple that were in a more complex permitting track and put them back into a simpler permitting track. So I think the model that we used in energy permitting reform is good for all kinds of permitting.
Thank you. Representative Murphy, I just want to kind of shift here to clean fuels, clean energy. What more can Minnesota do to be a clean fuel leader?
Well, my background is agriculture, so anything we can do for agriculture is important. I think that's a very good step. It's the base of our economy in agriculture, so it's really important. You know, some of the things that I see that are happening, I'm a little bit concerned about. Sequestration can add costs, and I want to make sure that we know the answers to sequestration. So I had a chance to visit with the owner of a coal mine in Center, North Dakota, and he had just spent $1.4 billion on his coal mine. And then he went on to spend another $1.4 billion to bury his CO2 6,000 feet in the ground. And in North Dakota, there's a lot of benefit for burying the CO2. We can push some oil, we can squeeze some oil out. But that is at a huge cost. $1.4 billion, I said, well, why did you do it? He said, if we don't do this, you'll shut us down. And that is how the affordability picture changes when that happens. So we want agriculture to do well with these other options like ethanol, like sustainable aviation fuel. We want those things for our producers, but we have to watch out that we're not making it so difficult for them to survive that we add a whole bunch of cost, and especially if we're not competitive with our neighbors and on a world stage. So we need to be careful of that. And I want to just make sure that we fully understand what that means. I ask all the time in committee, I said, what does it look like when we get there? Where is the CO2 going to be when we get there? People want to know. People want to know that all these costs are going to have an impact on what they're doing. So base of our economy is really important with agriculture, but we need to fully vet all of these out, I think.
Representative Acom, are there things that could be done to make it more affordable for these big projects to be developed in Minnesota?
Can we make big projects more affordable? I guess it maybe depends on what these big projects are. What I will say is that I think there's a lot of innovation in the room. I think that as we have looked at new types of energy generation, I think I'll use geothermal as an example. We've had a lot of really great new companies and new ideas that are going to help us in our decarbonization goals and in our look to the future. And so I think it depends on what those are and if we have partners with the federal government. I think, as was alluded to earlier by by Pete, I'm a first name kind of person, so by Pete, we in Minnesota, we pay a lot of federal taxes into the federal government, and we do not get as much back. And so to have that rug pulled out from under us has been challenging as we're looking to make long-term goals. Geothermal is one of those areas where we can continue to be doing work, and I'm hopeful that we as a state can do better to look at network geothermal, ways that we can be heating and cooling that are not going to be dependent on fossil fuels.
Senator Matthews, picking up there, we in Minnesota do have the opportunity on clean steel, on SAF. What can be done in this next session that maybe has bipartisan support to accelerate some of these projects that are just waiting for the legislature to maybe give it a little nudge?
It's a great question. I admittedly don't know the steel type of industry as well as I know some of the others that have been more pertinent in my district, but I've heard that it's been talked about quite a bit. I think the biggest thing that the legislators should do is let the innovators innovate. I don't think we need to jump in and figure out how we regulate, how we tax, or we will set up a fund asking for payments in for the privilege of doing business in our state like we've seen in other industries. I think we let you work on and prove that you get a good product that was done long before any 100% mandates or anything else came down the pike, something that will grow and get adopted and become widespread and mainstream. And so I think, you know, the legislature can nudge some innovation, but the legislature has power to hamper it a lot more quicker if we go that route too. So my encouragement to the legislature will be to not jump in and think we've got to regulate this and that we have all the answers from our offices in St. Paul, but let the innovators innovate, let you work on your products, let it get tested on the market, and we've seen a lot of successes before and can definitely see it again moving forward in these new areas.
We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and thank God the audience is smart, because that helps with complex topics. So as we wrap up here, start with Senator Frentz, and I want to get Greg back on schedule here, Commissioner, just so you know, I'll get us back on schedule. Start with Senator Frentz. Give Minnesota a grade as we enter an election year where energy is going to be a top 5 topic and maybe even come up when you door knock. Give us a grade on how well prepared we are on affordability and competitiveness of economic development. And is there anything you can do to improve your grade in this next session?
That's a great question, and thanks, Blois. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, fellow panelists. This is exactly the kind of conversation we should have. On affordability, I give us a B. And I mean, competing with 50 states, I think that's a good grade. What we can do is continue to support the PUC and continue to support open public conversations with folks like you in committee. The difference between the regulators and the legislators is that we are hired by the voters and we're fired by the voters. And so you mentioned election year. If you're not listening to your constituents, you're going to be the ex-senator pretty soon. So B on affordability. Economic development, C. There's a couple things we got to understand here, and I'll use my colleague, Senator Matthews' district. A lot of the data center discussions, and understand these are some of the most valuable buildings in the world, comes down to, well, let's do this to these data center purveyors. And a lot of it, in my opinion, is mistakenly presuming that they will be built in exactly the same places at exactly the same time frame. That's not true. We lost this project in Becker, and I mentioned you're a little nicer than me sometimes. We had the school superintendent in Becker testify in our committee. That's 40% of the school budget. You're talking about Minnesota school kids and an impact on their budgets. Jobs to build those things. Now, I'm not suggesting that we drop all our regulatory environment, but for example, we have a certificate of need requirement on backup generation. Backup generation, 100, 200 hours a year. And we already have a data center that has to be permitted through the PUC process for the utility and through the DNR and have water protections, which Minnesota is well known for being a stickler for, which I like. So the answer is C on the encouraging economic development. And I say to my colleagues in both parties, we have a certain revenue, and we're going to talk about the budget tomorrow. I'm sure we're going to talk about it because we have the forecast. And we often argue about the slices of the pie. Well, we're going to spend this slice on health and human services and this slice on education. I love it. It's such a cool job to work in St. Paul. I feel so privileged. But you don't hear us talking enough about how to grow that pie. And a lot of your businesses and a lot of the work you're doing are helping us expand it. Look at the #1 story out of this event, 64,000 jobs. Those are men and women who are going home, taking care of their families, providing us a service, and we can do a lot more of it. And there's a lot more I could say, but we want to stay on schedule.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Matthews, grades on affordability and being prepared for economic development in the future.
Yeah, I probably won't grade it quite as high as Senator Frentz would. I think we can compare it, like, where do we rank among the 50 states, but I don't think that's the correct first comparison we should be looking at. I think we need to look at how's it impacting the families on the ground, because it's not about how it's comparing against other states. They don't give a rip about that. It's how much is it taking out of the family budget, and is that getting too high? You know, I've looked at my own monthly statements and compared the same month from the year prior to the month of the current year and went, yikes. That's a pretty sharp increase, and wages are not going up as fast as many people's bills and utilities are. So that's a standard of comparison. I've kept asking multiple times in committee. Some of the people down at that table have probably gotten the question when I've looked at them after they give a nice presentation like this morning and said, give me your definition of affordable. What's the dollar number? What's the dollar range? What's the ballpark? Have yet to get a really good, solid answer on that. I mean, we like to throw these out, hey, affordable, reliable, clean, all of these things. Affordable by whose definition? Now, I will take it from, I think, how it impacts our families and our communities as the most important thing. I think grading how we compare to others and neighbors is good. But we definitely have a lot more work to do that could make it better, because we can sit up here and say, hey, we're the 7th best in the country, but in my community, I still hear my bills are going up, and it's a tighter squeeze on the family budget than it used to be just a short time ago. And that's the course correction I'm hoping that we keep making in the next few sessions.
Representative Acom, grades?
I will say overall, I think Minnesota is doing pretty good. What's the Lake Wobegon? We're above average. I think we are. And I think we saw some of the list of that today with Commissioner Sullivan. As far as affordability, I think they talk about things like energy burden. And so there's a ratio or a percentage of costs that your income is going toward paying your energy bills. And I forget what that number is, maybe 7% or something, I don't know, I don't remember. But we do have a growing number of energy burdened within our state. I think we just saw an impact, again, from the federal government with the delay of low-income heating assistance program coming to our state, and the impact that that's having on families all across our state. And so I think that we need to do a better job to help those who need help with their affordability. And as far as reliable, I think we had a presentation from MISO in our committee last year that said that Minnesota is the most reliable state within the MISO territory. I think that's great, and that comes from the great work that the dedicated commissioners are doing at the Public Utility Commission. What I think we also need to recognize is, as was said earlier by our moderator, is that energy costs are becoming an important issue to voters. And I think this last election in New Jersey, Virginia, in Georgia, you're seeing that people are recognizing the impact of their energy costs, and it's becoming an issue that is important to them when they're going to vote. And so we need to be recognizing that and addressing that in the policies that we're making and the places where we're choosing to invest. So I think overall we're doing well, and there's still a lot more that we can do.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you. I would say we need a little improvement. We have to spend a little more time maybe after hours working on things. I have some real concerns about in agriculture with property values. So I was met by commissioners in Douglas County, and they said we have to do something about property taxes. And where the property taxes are changing is an average grower can rent his ground out for $200 to $300 an acre. But the same grower can turn around and get around a $1,500 to $2,000 credit per acre for putting in solar farms. So the result is we have 83% of our solar installs in the state of Minnesota are in ag land, and 50% of those are on prime ag land. We can't do that. We are in one of the most prominent ag producing areas in the world. We can't take 100,000 acres and put our ag land into solar. It looks nice by the interstate, but we can't do it. And so that's one area. When you look at cost, you look at California costs and what their electric costs are producers, and I appreciate what we're doing now, but if we lose our base load, eventually, what will happen to the cost of power? If you look at agriculture, I come from dairy farming. You look at dairy farming, and they can spend a big bunch of money on electricity. Take $1,000 a month and take it times 5. That doesn't work. And that's not just the agriculture business, it's all businesses. And that's going to drive up costs for you that you didn't see, that didn't come from your electric bill, but came from everything else you use. So from a affordability standpoint, I think we need to do a lot more work on what this looks like, because we are definitely looking to an increase in electricity overall. Thank goodness for our neighbors that have hydro and coal that can supply us for now, but if we get to the point where we're not taking their power, we are going to pay more for electricity, and it's going to come in a lot of forms. So I think that we need to continue to work on this and really vet this whole thing out. I don't think we're done yet. Just one quick example. There hasn't been any real pilots done on climate, but there is one. It's in the Canary Islands. It's an island of 11,000 people. They decided to go completely, they're part of Spain, completely renewables. So the interesting thing is they have a reservoir that's two reservoirs that are 2,000 feet apart. So they move the water and they can produce their own hydro. Pretty unique, but that works well for them. And they put up wind and they have batteries. But right now today, after 10 years, they're only producing 10% of their electricity from renewables. And this has been their goal. Do we know what that outlook looks like down the road yet? Because if we get rid of our baseload power and we don't have nuclear on its way, and we have the baseload that we need, Minnesota is going to be on an island all by itself. So we need to look at all this stuff with a real fine-tooth comb. We have discussions like this. We encourage it. I think it's important to bring people in front that have both sides of the story. A lot of our research has been done through agencies and universities, but there's more data out there. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a lead. There's a documentary called Climate the Movie you should all watch. They interview people from the Undersecretary, Department of Energy. They interview people that are Nobel Peace Prize winner, but they will give you a little different impression. We need to be right on this. This will be a huge expense for Minnesota. And again, sometimes we run when we should walk a few times. And we need to be right on this one. This is really important to the state of Minnesota.
Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff, I'm going to switch it up for you. You have these four here. What's one or two things you'd like them to do this session?
In some ways, I'll say, let the things they've passed in the last two sessions start to play out. I don't have a huge agenda.
Got it.
So.
On that, I will note that one of my favorite quotes for Lieutenant Governor Flanagan when I interviewed her about what she's learned from going from the legislature to the administration was that sometimes the legislature passes things that they don't understand how tough they are to implement in the administration. I want to thank our panelists, thank Greg and the team. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone for braving some of the negative degree days to get out here. And for those online, we appreciate you jumping in and hearing what our various legislators had to say. I just want to take a moment once again to thank our sponsor, NextEra Energy Resources. Without them, we wouldn't be able to be here today. So we truly appreciate it. If we could just give them a quick round of applause. And with that, I have the big job of saying it's time to go. So we have this room for about 7 minutes, 10:30. So if you have any last-minute conversations, please continue having those, and we'll be in touch about Clean Energy Business Day on April 1st.